Okay, everybody, I'm just letting people in. Okay. Okay, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see some familiar faces now. Um, so this is the third class of 3 on Shtisel. We have looked at, in the first class, we looked at the theme in Shtisel on grief and the resolution of grief, a very important and major theme throughout. In last week's class, we focused on the paintings and the progression of the paintings that Akiva did in the first 2 seasons. He continued to paint, of course, in the 3rd season. We see mostly his portraits of his wife, who dies, and then his final painting, which is a portrait of his new wife, Racheli. All right, so today I wanted to show various scenes and segments from all of the years of this, all the seasons, and focus in on, in particular, a principle that we look at in Kabbalah, and that is to pay attention to what shows up. Now, the awareness practice that we connect with this is that on your car, on the passenger side, on the mirror, it's imprinted into the mirror from the manufacturer. Objects in mirror are closer than they appear, right? So when we understand that objects in the mirror are closer than they appear, we begin to see that what shows up in our lives is a way for us to pay attention, to see what is happening, and to see what it is that we would like to learn from what is manifesting in our lives. So that means that we pay attention to what shows up. So I want to highlight this theme throughout Shtisel, where they will pay attention. Sometimes they don't pay attention, but when they do, they highlight the fact that they're paying attention to what shows up. All right. And then if we have time, I hope we will, I'd like to maybe at the end close with a little discussion about why Shtisel has shown up. Not just in our lives, but why has Shtisel shown up in a more general way, all right? So to illustrate what we're talking about, which is how we pay attention to what shows up, let's start with this piece from season 1. So if you remember in season 1, Akiva is engaged to a young woman, but he is concerned about the fact whether is he ready or not ready to marry. Does he really has he secured for himself his own independence? Does he have a job? So this is the discussion between Akiva and his father Shulam on the balcony. And by the way, this balcony serves as the place where things happen of most import, and in season 1 and in season 2. All right. Can you see the screen, and is it showing a scene from Shtisel? Just making sure that you're seeing it. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay.
מה זאת אומרת? אולי זה לא הדבר הכי נכון בשבילי. להתחתן כל כך מהר. כל כך מהר? אפילו עבודה אין לי. איך בדיוק אני אפרנס אותה?
קיווה, תקשיב טוב, קיווה. זה תמיד כך. לכל אחד יש את הרגעים האלה בין האירוסין לחתונה, שהוא חושב למה ככה ואולי ככה, אבל אתה יודע מה אומרים?
מה אומרים?
סופק בגימטריה סוטון, או משהו כזה. אין לך מה לדאוג. בחרת בלב שלם, עשית את הצעד הנכון, והקלה שלך היא נהדרת. הכי מיוחדת מכל הקלות שלי.
באמת? כנראה שהיא באמת מיוחדת. היום באולם דיברתי עם אבא שלה.
תקשיב. שמעת? תראה איזה השגוח. אתה מדבר איתי על דאגות פרנסה, ותכף יוצאת לך בסקול מהכביש מלמטה.
לא צריך לשמוע, לוויה של מי זה?
רבי חשי. הוא בטח קיבל עוד התקף לב, ועכשיו אתה מקבל את הכיתה שלו לתמיד.
אבא, באמת, אני לא חושב שזה יפה לשמוח ככה. מסכן.
מה איתך? נפלא או יסדר כהשם. רצית סימן מהשמיים? הנה קיבלת. בוא, תלבש משהו ונלך ללוואי.
Okay. It's an interesting way to introduce this concept of paying attention to what shows up, because after all, once again, Shulam is not exactly showing us his exemplary self. And Akiva points that out, which is, why should we be happy about the misfortune of others? But Shulam is making and highlighting a point that we all need to pay attention to, and that is, when things show up, are they in a way a guide to us or a reinforcement for us about the path that we should take? So Shulam is making a point, even though it's at the expense of this, gentleman teacher who we actually get to know in the show. Shulam is saying, you asked for a sign. Here's the sign. Here it is. So pay attention. And in a way, you could say that he's arguing that it was the exact thing that Akiva needed to learn. That was the next thing for his progression and for him to get married. All right, so any comments about that one first? Then we'll take a look at the next one, also from season 1. Yes, Claudia.
I don't think the job was really what was holding him up.
Well, for sure not. But what was holding him up in that moment was an excuse. And what Shulam was saying is that excuse no longer exists. Look, here it is. The roadblock is clear, right? Your prayer is answered. Now you're right, Claudia. He'll come up with some other problem. All right. So any other comments about that one? But are you getting the principle here, which is we need to pay attention to what shows up, and the people in the show do pay attention to what shows up. Now, yes, June. June, unmute yourself.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it showed a way of thinking. He comes to his father with a problem, and his father answers it probably exactly how he went into marriage. Don't worry, it'll come right. I want you, in other words, I want you to get married. It's the right thing to do. And don't worry, any doubts, don't pay attention to. It's like the devil as we think about it. Just do it as generations before us. It doesn't matter where you're at with it. There was no deep, really understanding. It was traditional.
Well, June, to reinforce what you're saying, for Shulam, it's more important that his son get married than to whom he's getting married. Right. It's just get married.
Get married.
And what they now remember, this is early on in our relationship with this family and the show. This is only episode 5. So we're really getting this feeling that it's not so important what your desires are or feelings are. What's more important is to, in a sense, God will take care of everything else. Don't worry about it. We don't need other issues to be involved, like love and common interest, and you have a woman here who's interested in marrying you. Go for it.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of the equation, Shulam, understandably, is a little frustrated with Akiva, because even if we hadn't gotten the impression from the outset, Akiva is a reluctant groom. He is a reluctant young man in terms of marriage, and that is because, and this we can connect with what we talked about last week, it's because he is an artist. It's because he is an emotional person. He's not just getting married for the sake of getting married. He wants something to be passionate, to be exciting for him in terms of being able to find the right match.
But there's no sensitivity to his being. Akiva is a sensitive young man. he's different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't allow him to get anything from Akiva. He just is talking from above. Just get married. Don't come with Boba masses. Just get married.
Yes. And with our sensibilities nowadays, that may not, it may be very far from our sense of what is appropriate. But in that community, and I know the community intimately, we can imagine that these kinds of things do occur in families where the pressure is on, and it's more important to have it look right in some way than it be fulfilling.
Who was the woman this time?
I'm sorry, say again?
Who was the potential bride this time?
I think this was Esty. I think, but I'm pretty sure that was her.
But isn't that in the general population? There are pressures that we put on our kids, not maybe to the same extent, but we kind of, advertently or inadvertently say, well, do you think, this is something that's good for you? I mean, we ask our questions also. It's not quite as clear cut, but I think parents, when their kids are getting married, do ask questions, and a lot of doubt comes up for both sides before kids get married. So we've got to deal with them. So
Right.
It's not unrealistic. It's just maybe Haredi. Do you know what I mean? That's really what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, this is the version that we're seeing in this kind of family. All right. Do you remember in season 1 where Shulam finds a little tiny Torah? Do you recall that? He's at his other son's house. His other son's name is Tzvi Aryeh.
Finds baby.
And right, they call it the baby Torah. All right. Now, by the way, again, I don't know. I have seen 2 of these baby Torahs in my life. One was in the house of Rabbi Cook, who was the son of the former chief rabbi of Israel. When I was a young man, I went to his home to study with him. He was already well into his 80s, if not 90 years old. And I remember being given the honor. I was there on a Saturday afternoon, Shabbat, and I was given the honor of lifting the Torah. And I literally lifted this Torah with my fingers. It was that small. And then the second time is here in Denver with Rabbi Twersky. Rabbi Twersky's family had a tiny baby Torah, which we only read from on very few occasions. In fact, I remember reading from it when we rededicated that little Torah because it needed to be fixed by a scribe. So very similar to what's going on in the story of Shtisel. He wants to know whether the Torah is kosher. But really, it's just an excuse or a way for him to reconnect with his estranged daughter, who we didn't even know existed, but with his estranged daughter and son-in-law. Now, do you remember what happened there? Why were they estranged? Do you recall this? If someone recalls it, just let me know. Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, he did not approve of the marriage. Is that it?
Exactly. And do you remember the reason why he was prejudicial against this marriage? So the daughter, see, again, back to June's point, the daughter married a man with two problems. One, he was Sephardic, so that was one strike against him. And the second is that he was Hasidic. He was part of the Lubavitch Chabad sect. So Shulam actually didn't even go to the wedding. So he has been distanced from his daughter and son-in-law, but more importantly, from all of his grandchildren. The implication is that he's never even met them. So here he is with this little Torah, and he's taking it up to visit his daughter and son-in-law, and the son-in-law is a scribe. So the son-in-law would be able to fix this Torah if it needs to be fixed. Now, the key element also to understand this scene is that on Torahs, they'll put they usually call it a mantle, but a covering that fits over the Torah. It's specially made because it has to have two holes on the top so that I know what they call it in Hebrew, but in English, I'm not sure what it is. But the Eitz HaChaims, the things that you roll the scroll with, so that they can fit through. And often there's an inscription that's placed onto, usually sewn in to the velvet cover that covers the Torah. And on this, there's a dedication to honor Shulam's grandfather, who has the same name as Shulam. Shulam is named after him. So he sees this little baby Torah with his name on it as a sign. So let's take a look and watch that scene. And it'll just take me 1 second to get there. If you remember, even if you see this picture, he and his son are traveling by train up to the north of Israel. And we're picking this up at the 33rd minute.
אז אתה יודע כבר מתי משחררים אותך?
Okay, here we go.
שכתוב כאן, רב שולם שטיסל, אני קרוי על שמו. סיפור ארוך, אבל העיקר אתמול. בדיוק בתקופה שיש לי מה שאמרתי לך בעיות עם הלב. צבי אריה, האח שלי, מוצא את הספר הזה בפויטן. אני צריך להסביר יותר מזה.
לא הסברת כלום.
בואי תקשיבי לי רגע, הספר הזה, הקודש ברוך הוא בא ואומר לי, הזמן שלך נגמר. אפילו ספר תוירה על שמך כבר יש. רק צריך לעשות כמה תיקונים ואתה יכול למות. בשביל זה אני כאן. הבנת? אם הקודש ברוך הוא אומר לי למות, אני לא מתווכח. רוצה לעלות לבייס דין של מלו, נקי כמה שאפשר. לכן עשיתי את כל הדרך הזאת.
אז בעצם הוא מבקש סליחה.
בהחלט. אני מבקש סליחה. סתם אני עומד כאן חצי שעה ומבלבל את המוח. אני מבקש סליחה. בהחלט.
הרב שטיסל, זה לא רלוונטי.
מה לא רלוונטי?
הספר תורה הזה, הוא לא במצב... אי אפשר לתקן אותו.
מה זאת אומרת? אי אפשר.
Okay, so then it's going to proceed to another scene here. All right. So what are you seeing in this scene? I mean, you may see other things too, but and certainly comment. But in terms of the relevance of what we said at the outset, paying attention to what shows up as a sign, as a message to us. What are you seeing in this one?
Well, he just had a heart attack and faced mortality, and now the Torah can't be repaired. It's like another death.
Mhm. Nice insight, Claudia. What else? What else?
And perhaps the relationship with his daughter and son-in-law is beyond repair.
Now remember, Susan, I also thought that, but he's come up there to attempt to repair the relationship, and at the end, he is able to do that. I don't know if you remember this scene, but she agrees that he can come up every so often to meet with the grandchildren and teach them. So even though she understandably would be fairly bitter about his rejection of her and her husband, I think it was pretty generous of her to accept his apology and want at least some kind of reconnection with him, right? But remember, he's thinking that he's going to die, and he wants to put his affairs in order. But why does he think he's going to die? Well, he has a heart attack, so that's the medical piece. But what showed up in his life that gave him the sense that God was calling him? So what? And therefore, that's why he wanted to go up there. He didn't want to die without at least trying to repair the relationship with his daughter and son-in-law. But what was the impetus for him feeling like he could or needed to do this?
Didn't he have a vision when he was online to see the doctor? He had a vision of dying.
Yes. In fact, he has a dream that he is up in heaven. Do you remember that dream? He has a dream where he's waiting in line to go see God, or at least one of the angels that is in charge. And he, who is standing in front of him in the line? His son-in-law, his estranged son-in-law. And the estranged son-in-law, oh, actually, I'm sorry, he's not in line to see God. He's in line to see the Lubavitcher rabbi who's up in the front. And Shulam is wondering whether the rabbi is going to allow him, into the pearly gates, or was going to reject him because he has rejected the son-in-law who is Lubavitch, right? That was the dream. So in fact, then we're seeing what? That they are trying to work out a compromise of the challenge they have with the relationship. But Shulam is taking the meaning of finding this little baby Torah as a sign that he is about to die. Because the name on the Torah is his. And it's in memory of that name. Granted, it's the grandfather, but it's the same name. Right? So that's what prompted all of his anxiety about his death, along with, of course, the diagnosis of a heart attack. All right. Let's take a look now then at, just trying to see There are a couple of scenes in season 2 that we could take a look at. But let's take a look at this from season 3. All right, so let's take a look at season 3. All right, let me just first close out of this. Okay. Season 3, episode 1. So a lot of the, we remain interested in Akiva, but when it comes to matchmaking, we now are shifting our attention to Akiva's sister, Gitti, and her son. So this boy's name is Yasala. Okay, so 3342. All right. So I forgot to lead up to this for a second. So Yasala goes out on his very first match. He walks into a hotel lobby, this is par for the course. This is, if you go to any hotel lobby in Israel in the evening, you will see a whole bunch of matches being attempting to be connected. But Yasala walks into the hotel lobby and sees this woman who comes up to him and says, Shira, and they sit down. Now, this is the wrong Shira. He was supposed to meet with Shira Levinson, and he's meeting with this other Shira, and they have a lovely time. Meanwhile, he doesn't know that Shira Levinson is sitting somewhere in the lobby too, looking at her watch, waiting for him to show up, and he never does. So if you've watched season 3 or remember it, it turns out that he winds up then meeting Shira Levinson, and they get engaged. But his heart is really with the other Shira. All right. Now, Gitti and Lipa, Gitti's the mother, Lippi's the father, are very different people. Lipa is a romantic. He is more emotional, and Gitti, if you remember what we talked about with Sholem before, very similar. Gitti wants it to look a certain way, be a certain way, very much no nonsense. So I want to show you this scene then between the two of them, again, with the notion of, do we pay attention to what shows up?
מצאתי אותה, גיטי. מצאתי אותה.
את מי?
את שירה, של יוסלה, זאת שהוא פגש בטעות. שירה לוי קוראים לה. גיטי, אל תשאלי, אני עברתי שדכן בספר טלפונים עד שמצאתי, את לא מבינה. ומה מסתבר? שגם הם חיפשו את הבחור, והם רוצים להמשיך, מאוד רוצים.
מי אלה בכלל?
משפחה מצוינת. גם האבא, גם האח הבכור, הם ממש תלמידי חכמים. והם נותנים גם דירה, כמו לוינסון. יש רק דבר אחד שהיא... היא קצת...
קצת מה?
שום דבר. הם פשוט אוהבים את הדג שלהם קצת יותר חריף משלנו, זה הכל.
על מה אתה מדבר?
את יודעת מה אומרים על גירוש ספרד, גיטי? שמאותן משפחות ממש, חלק ברחו למזרח אירופה וחלק ברחו למרוקו וכל זה.
היא מרוקאית?
אלג'יר.
אז מה הסתבר בכלל?
אבל גיטי, זה דור אחר עכשיו, זה כולנו יהודים. זה שפעם היו מקפידים לא להתחתן עם... זה לא אומר שזה באמת איזה...
אני מבקשת ממך, תעזוב את זה. שלא תחשוב אפילו לספר ליוסלה שמצאת אותה. אני רוצה שנהיה מסוגלים במשפחה הזאת לעשות משהו אחד כמו שצריך, לפי הספר.
אבל גיטי...
משהו אחד כמו שצריך. אפשר?
Okay. Now, there's a lot to dissect from this one. But for our purposes of today's theme, we're looking at paying attention to what shows up. Right? Now, there's two elements here. First, the fact that Lipa went on his crusade to find this Shira Levi, did everything possible that he could to find her, because he knows that his son's heart is with this young woman, not the other young woman. But Gitti wants to have nothing of it. And her, by the way, I think it's implied that if this other Shira met the criteria of Gitti, then she would have no objection to finding the other Shira. And if Yosela likes her, fine. But she does have an objection. And that is that from her point of view, this is a mixed marriage. This is a marriage of Ashkenazi Jew with a Sephardi Jew. And there's a prejudice there that she's, which she has, by the way, a hard time letting go of. Even after they agree that he breaks off the engagement with Shira Levinson to pursue Shira Levi, but Gitti has a hard time dealing with that whole scenario. But what I really like is Lipa's statement, which is, maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe there's something that you should pay attention to here in the fact that this whole mistake occurred and that our son met this young woman that he really loves and or fell in love with, all right? Now, again, for our sensibilities, and Gitti points it out, what does my 18-year-old son know anything about love? And by the way, you met her once. What are you talking about? But there's the romantic, right? There's Akiva, there is Lipa, there is Yosela, who says, no, I know when I meet my soulmate, I know I'm meeting my soulmate, right? And that's the key. All right, your input on that piece too. Yes, Claudia.
Well, she still blames her husband for leaving because she said, let us do something right. Can't this family do something right? And I think she was implying that.
In fact, Claudia, we could even say that's the power piece that she holds over him.
Right.
Yeah, which is unfair, but yes.
It's interesting to me that you mentioned these three men as being romantics. Usually it's the women who are the romantics. And I'm just wondering about this community of women and the power they wield and the manipulation that is implied, how they manipulate their families to their own will, disregarding the romantic.
Well, it's interesting, Ivor. I had not thought about that, but it's certainly not. It's understood, and I want everyone to understand, if they're watching Shtisel, that if either the man or the woman, and these are usually young, very young men and young women, if either of them object to the match will not happen. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't a lot of pressure for the match to occur. Remember how Nuchum puts a lot of pressure, that's Shulam's brother, puts a lot of pressure on his own daughter Libi to accept the match with that other man, not Akiva, who she winds up with, but the other man who is, the cream of the cream, and why should she reject him? And she should, so there's no question that the parents are going to can put undue pressure to accept the match. But in the end, if the child says no, the answer is no, and that includes the woman. But I would suggest, along with Ivor is saying, that women in those scenarios, often, I think the pressure may be more on them than on the men to accept the shidduch, to accept the match. And when you don't have as much power, right? When you don't have as much, the power has to get, the power has to be played out in some ways. I mean, I'm recollecting in season 3, how Tzvi Aryeh's wife, who wants to buy a car, get a license and buy a car, she's willing to lie to Tzvi Aryeh's friend and say to him, me get a license? Are you crazy? I'm not going to get a license. And I mean, but meanwhile, she has the license and she bought the car. So they, in other words, within a patriarchal system, women have to assert their sense of power and competency and a feeling of their own value. And I think that we can understand that they, it might look manipulative, but actually it's a way for them to survive and to be, and to stand on their own sense of self. So I think that's a nice balance between those two. Other comments? All right, well then let's take a look at this last piece. Also from season 3. And this one has to do with, one second. This one has to do with a very poignant, and I'd say almost one of the most powerful pieces in all of the Shtisel seasons, which is the conversation that Racheli has with Shulam about how she meets his son Akiva. And if you recall, Racheli is the one who is challenged with bipolar disorder. She can be very manic and then also very depressed. And a very powerful piece on how she pays attention to what shows up. So this is in season 3, episode 9. And I apologize, but I just got to close out my other stuff and to get to it. Okay.
הבעיה שלי, הנפשית, נהיה פתאום יקר.
אוקיי.
כמו יהלום. אתה מבין?
יפה, יפה מאוד. רק...
Okay. Here we go.
אז מה? איך באמת? קיבה ואת? איך זה התחיל ביניכם וכולי?
אתה יודע איך הכרתי אותו? הסתובבתי ברחוב, ופתאום אני רואה מול העיניים שלי אישה. קלה. מסתכלת עליי מתוך איזה ציור. כאילו היא מחכה לי. בדיוק עברתי את אחד הגלים הכי חזקים שאי פעם שטפו אותי. הרגשתי כאילו אני באיזו ארץ רחוקה. רציתי למות. וכל האנשים סביבי, גם הם נראו לי מתים. מתים מהלכים. יצאתי מטיפול וניסיתי לחזור לחיים. האישה הזאת, שבעלה צייר אותה, והיא כבר לא חיה, ובכל זאת, היא הייתה האדם הכי חי שראיתי. ופתאום רציתי לחיות. לעשות הכל בשביל לחיות ולאהוב את החיים. כל רגע בחיים נהיה פתאום יקר. כמו יהלום. אתה מבין?
יפה, יפה מאוד. רק פספסתי שם משהו בהתחלה שאמרת משהו על הים או משהו כזה, או טיפול, או גלים.
עקיבא לא דיבר איתך?
Okay. So Shulam is finding out for the first time. Remember, Shulam was adamant that Akiva should say, remember, they actually get married, right? But their marriage is really a pretense. They're only marrying so that they can look as if they are this really wonderful couple that are going to be good parents to little Devorah. So it was just a pretense. But Shulam rants at Akiva to not only, stay married, right, because they are married already, but embrace Racheli as this amazing woman. She's incredible. She's a saint. And now he finds out one little flaw, but of course for him it's not a little flaw, but he sees this flaw of mental illness, and he's going to change his entire demeanor and tell Akiva, what are you doing? How can you marry this lady or stay married to her? Immediately go and get divorced, right? But this powerful scene, which I want you to focus on, is a scene where she is seeing the portrait of Libby, and it has the power of bringing her out of her depression, wanting her to embrace life. Now, again, at that moment, she doesn't realize that in purchasing that painting and a couple of others, that's going to lead to what? Her meeting the artist who painted the portrait. And she will wind up not only marrying him, but falling in love with him. So this is a very powerful piece in the whole. To me, this is what makes season 3 so special. All right. So, what is your point of view on, again, paying attention to what shows up?
So what shows up for her is the spiritual experience of the portrait speaking to her and leading her into a different way of life. Her whole attitude changed. She felt something really deep inside. On the contrast, it shows how Kiva's father, how insensitive he is and how non-spiritual he is, because what showed up for her was totally disregarded by him. He didn't even, I don't think he appreciated the importance of what it was for her. And he just wasn't a spiritual guy, despite being a very learned man. And,
Right. So it doesn't mean that all learned men are spiritual.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes an intellectual pursuit, whether it be in Torah learning, in science, in psychology, sometimes intellectual pursuits don't necessarily connect you spiritually. In fact, they may take you away from it. Not necessarily, of course, but they may. But you're right, Ivor, to point out that it was almost like he could take the story in, but there was one thing that was like a big black hole that kind of became his entire vision. and he couldn't see the painting behind it anymore. All he could see was what? Ruin for his son and for his granddaughter.
Right.
That's what he was imagining. And what's remarkable is, you know, a couple episodes before, he is singing her praises and wanting Akiva to do everything possible to embrace this marriage. All right. Any other comments? Yes, June, and then Claudia.
You know, I think that this is such a complex moment. I think we see a lot of things. You say, what shows up? It shows the difficulty of Racheli living with that mental illness. It shows that she sees Shtisel as life for her, maybe the only way to actually have life. It also shows how it's almost like you have to be perfect to belong to the group. You can't show up, you know, and that's from Sholem himself. You can't show up with a flaw. And it was, you know, just like a painting. And he just falls in love with this, she falls in love with this.
June, I can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
Let me try and sit somewhere else.
No, now you're
That's
good.
good now.
Now you're good.
Okay, I've got you back. I don't know what's going on here.
All right. But thank you, June.
You know, so that's my opinion. The other thing, I know it's going back to the previous thing, we really see a real statement, I didn't get to say it, with Gitti and Lippy,
Yeah.
how their marriage and why he went looking for something different. I think it's that rigidity that he is having a hard time living with. And I think rigidity is a theme in Shtisel.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I agree. To put your both ideas together, June, there's rigidity and there's a concern about flaws, but especially if the flaw is something that the community looks askance upon and is something that's clearly seen.
Mm-hmm.
All of these people have flaws, and we see them all. But the question is, are they visible to others? Right? That's the big issue. And by the way, Sholem, do you remember when he hits the boy in the face?
Mm-hmm.
You know, his biggest issue becomes that other people are objecting to what he did because they see it. And they say this is not okay nowadays, right? But if nobody knew about it,
it would be okay.
It wouldn't be a flaw. It would not be a big issue.
Well,
all
isn't
right,
that the
Claudia.
story of abuse?
Yes, what showed up for her, as she walked away, she said to herself, not everyone wants to hear my story.
Yes, I didn't play that, but then she does say that.
Right.
Well, Claudia, she said it in a very sweet way. She said, this is not a story for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she realized it was just always a part of her, and now she knows really not everyone wants to know it.
All right, so I just want to highlight for all of you in terms of a Kabbalah teaching. The next time you're walking down the street and you see a painting in a storefront and you're attracted to it and brought into it, you know, sometimes it doesn't show up that way. It shows up as a billboard or as a license plate. or as a song. But that's the key, which is, do we pay attention to what shows up, right? Do we pay attention to the people that show up, the ideas that show up, the shows that show up, the discussions we have, who's on the screen with you now? I remember this past Rosh Hashanah, we had a Zoom service for the first time because people couldn't come to service. And there were two people on the screen, and they realized they had gone to high school together and had not seen each other in 40 years. And they were not living both in Denver. One was in Denver and the other person was far away. So, this is the important thing, to pay attention, especially when something shows up that, as in the very first scene, is an answer to a question you have, or something shows up repetitively. Those are the important things to pay attention to. And that's the very first principle or practice of awareness of Kabbalah. So I didn't get to hear from all of you or even see all of you, but I do want to let you know that we're going to be teaching a class on season 3 of Shtisel this summer. It will be on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock Denver time. And you can find out more about that class or any other class that we're offering here at Kabbalah Experience on our website, which is KabbalahExperience.com. All right. I hope that there were some insights here from the 3 classes that we took a look at that can be of help to you in terms of seeing how that is relevant to your lives. The season 3 class I taught for the first time this spring. We'll reprise it for the summer with, and these classes never stay static, and we will cover lots of other themes over the summer that emerge from our watching season 3. So for any of you who can join us, please do, and look forward to seeing you then. Have a wonderful summer.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.